Without the fortress, without the family, what is left of Superman, an absolute defender of the people of Steel? Today we're going to be talking about Absolute Superman issues 1 and 2. Let me know in the comments section what you guys thought of this version of the Man of Tomorrow. I'm Brennan for the New Wave Nerds. Subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Absolute Superman is written by Jason Aaron with art by Rafa Sandoval and is set in what was previously known as the DC Elseworld. In a recent comics event, the DC All-In Special, this world was reformed using Darkseid energy. Reformed into a world driven by challenge and turmoil, a world where hope is the underdog and where heroes are born facing even greater odds. Batman has no mansion, Wonder Woman has no Amazons, and Superman has no family. But the differences don't end there. To hear more about what's changed as far as Batman goes, go ahead and take a listen to our previous episode. Just went live Tuesday for Shayde's analysis of Absolute Batman. As far as Wonder Woman goes, you're going to have to stick around until next Tuesday for my video on that. But for now, let's focus on Absolute Superman. So as I mentioned, there are a few differences to the origin of Superman here. Typically, he arrives on Earth after the destruction of Krypton as a young baby, and he lands in the fields of Kansas, right? He's picked up by Ma and Pa Kent, and he is shown a loving childhood where he's treated as though he's a human for as long as possible, where he feels like a human until he realizes that he is much more than that. But the way that that's changed in the Absolute universe is, well, for starters, Krypton doesn't explode until a little bit later in Kal-El's life. Like I said, normally he's rocketed off when he is a baby, but in this case, in Absolute Superman, he is like 8 or 9. He is a young child, right? He has spent time with his parents. He has grown up with Jor-El, and I want to say her name is Lara Lorvan, but I'm not 100% sure on the last name there. Lara L. He's grown up with them. He has spent time with them. In some ways, the Absolute universe has shifted, and Batman's origin has become, and Superman's origin has become much closer to Batman's, right? He's grown up with, although Kel-El is never privileged, he's grown up loved by his biological parents, and they are taken away from him at a very young age, similar to what happens to a young Bruce Wayne. But even further than that, just beyond the fact that his very childhood is different, after Krypton is destroyed and Superman, as he will become known as, when Kal-El is rocketed off of Krypton, he lands on Earth, but not in Kansas. He actually lands, well, I don't know if they specifically say where he lands, but when we pick up with him in the story, he's in Brazil. And we'll learn throughout the course of the issue, I think a little bit more in issue 2, but as we learn throughout, Kal-El, because obviously at this point he isn't named Clark. Nobody would have given him the name Clark, and he wouldn't be Superman at this point because the world is still relatively unfamiliar with him. Kal-El is living this nomad lifestyle, right? He has no family. He has no home. Like I said, there's no fortress of solitude. And so Kel-El is just traveling the world trying to right injustice, right? Trying to save those who do not have the power to save themselves. And the way that mostly manifests is that he has spent years battling the Lazarus Corp, this massive multinational corporation, which is it's ambiguous what their actual sort of mission statement is. But when we encounter them in issue number 1, they are operating in this mine, which is searching for diamonds, essentially. Or the host matrix for diamonds is, I believe, the language that they use there. But they're mining for minerals, we'll just say. An interesting allegory could be the cobalt mines in Africa, where these workers are subjected to these terrible working conditions for pennies on the dollar. in this case, the workers in Brazil, right? They're working to the bone for these diamonds, and they come upon a large deposit of asbestos, right? Which is obviously, as we know now, an incredible carcinogen, right? And so Superman his lifestyle has been traveling, sort of helping the quote-unquote people of steel, right? Because some further changes to the origin of Superman, some further changes to the class structure of Krypton, typically, and this may be different in some of the comics, but especially in, like, say, the movies, Jor-El and Lara-El are members of the upper strata of society, right? They are part of the upper crust. Jor-El is almost always a famous, a well-known and well-respected scientist who comes forward with the information that Krypton is being destroyed. But in this case, the House of El is not among the upper members of society, though they very well could have been, right? Lara and Jor-El are both incredibly gifted. They're both incredibly intelligent, and they were on track to be in the upper strata, the clerics of the Science Guild, I believe they're called. But they both, at various points in their life, voiced dissenting opinions, and because of that, they were shunted to this bottom class, the Labor Guild. And the symbol of the Labor Guild is the emblem, what the X symbol, the shield. The symbol which formerly stood for hope now stands for shame. It stands for, as I can't remember if this is Jor-El, it might be Lara, but one of them says they are the children of the sun. They are the people steel, those who work with their hands, those who, toil and actually labor to bring benefit to society. Which I think is an interesting, it's definitely an interesting change. And I like the way that it makes sense, right? I like the way that they tie in Kal-El's origin on the planet Krypton to his actions on the planet Earth, right? This is a guy who knows very little, right? He was shunted off of Krypton, presumably again at the ages of, like, say, 8 to 10, fairly young, definitely the equivalent of an elementary school kid. He's shunted off to Earth with no friends, no family, no knowledge whatsoever. And so he just does what he can. He does what he knows. He experienced the injustice in his regular everyday life on Krypton and sees the same things here. And so because of that, he is working to right those wrongs. I think it's very well done. I do think some of the messaging, while I generally agree with the sort of anti-corporatist, anti-establishment narrative that's going on here, I will say that it is a little bit heavy-handed. I wish it were ever so slightly more subtle, or if there was a little bit more nuance, but we're only 2 issues in, right? In what is minimum a 5-issue arc, and what we will presumably see more of later on. But I do think it could have stood to be ever so slightly more subtle. But that being said, I think it's very well written. It's very, very enjoyable. I have really, really been liking it so far. I cannot wait until the 3rd issue is released. I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. But there is one thing that is a little bit weird. There's a change that I don't know if I would necessarily say I like or dislike. Again, it's pretty early on, so there's still definitely time for this to bloom into something that I would enjoy or something that makes more sense. But the way that Superman works in Earth Prime in the standard version is he sort of passively absorbs the radiation of the sun, right? It seems like he is more or less always powered up. There very rarely is Superman in, say, a power drought, if you will, and in a place where he is fatigued, not from overexertion, say, but just from lack of solar radiation. But in Absolute Superman, Kel-El has to actively charge, right? When he's sleeping in what looks like a storage container in the favelas of Brazil, there's a hexagonal shaped solar panel on the roof, which is absorbing the energy from the sun. And what am I trying to say? You're sending it along cords to Superman. I don't know why that was so difficult to say. But so that is something that is a little bit of a change. It's less like Superman is, say, solar powered, and it's more like Superman is a battery in this case. If I'm comparing it to phones, Superman Prime is like me with my phone, right? It's all bare minimum. It's at like 50%. It's always charged. I've always got it. And I don't want to be somewhere where I need to contact somebody and my phone's dead, right? So I always make sure it's up to a reasonable degree. And then Absolute Superman is a little bit closer to Shayde in his phone, right? Where it's always dead. The most you'll ever see it have is like 20%, and that's on like a good day. It's like he's scrolling around and it just dies, and he's not surprised at all. That seems to be the sort of state that Kal-El is currently in. I don't know if this is going to remain the status quo, or if this is going to be the type of thing which is going to be a problem which is alleviated as Superman gets more powerful. I'm tempted to say that no, it's not going to be alleviated. I'm tempted to say that it is just the point of the absolute universe, that it is incredibly difficult for the Superman to be able to actually use his power. But there are some reasons, and I'll get into these a little bit later once we start to wrap the episode up and we start to speculate moving forward. There are some reasons that I think that this could change moving forward, but it is a little bit weird. But that being said, so that's one thing that I sort of dislike. I wouldn't say I would dislike, but I'm not super crazy about, let's say. But why don't we talk about something that I, surprisingly enough, really love, really, really enjoyed. And this is something that I didn't think I was going to like. And that's the suit. The Superman suit in this is really, really interesting. When the first promo images were revealed, I wasn't necessarily crazy on it. I didn't have quite the negative view on Superman's suit as I did on, like, say, the absolutebatman suit. But I was a little bit hesitant, specifically on the wrist and the wrist guards and greaves, I guess, the boot area, his calves. I don't know. I wasn't necessarily crazy on the way that those look, but as we got into the issue, and as I started to see it more, I definitely started to like it more and more. But there are differences, some very distinct differences between this Superman suit and Superman's as we typically understand it. So normally in Earth Prime, obviously with Superman having landed in Kansas and raised by the Kents, typically Ma Kent, whose real name I can't remember right now, but typically it's Ma Kent who uses Kryptonian fabric to tailor his suit. Specifically, there's a big thing about the cape. But in this, obviously not having landed in Kansas, that strikes a bit of a problem, right? So how is this suit developed? Well, in this universe, the suit is crafted by Lara-El. It's crafted by Kel-El's mother, and it's made by her, and we don't learn this until issue 2, but it's made by her at the age of 12. So she's 9 years old. She writes this essay criticizing the Kryptonian government for not prioritizing space travel. At 9, she is castigated. She is forever barred from joining the Science Academy, forever, reduced to only being a member of the Labor Guild. And then at 12, she designs this suit, which it's part exploratory spacesuit, part spaceship, all in one. And it looks incredible. I really enjoy the line work on it. A really good display of it, in my opinion, is the Jim Lee variant cover for Superman #1. I just love that cover, but it showcases the suit really well. He's standing off and floating in space or something, and he goes, it's a good cover. Look it up. I really enjoy it. I don't know if it's... Now, we're not gonna get into a discussion on variant covers right now, because that could take me a long time. But furthermore, the suit itself, despite the fact that it is, part spaceship, part exosuit, I suppose, it's it's described by Lois Lane as a living armor. She says that it's almost constantly shifting to suit Kal-El's needs. And more than that, within the suit itself, there is this sentient AI, which is called Soul, which is fun, Soul, sun, whatever. A little bit, I mean, it's not exactly the most original of naming schemes, but it works. And the AI is interesting. I think there's some interesting implications for what this AI means moving forward. And again, I'll get to those towards the end of the episode. But I do enjoy the interaction between Kal-El and Soul. It's fun. It makes sense. It's sort of like this quote-unquote training wheels protocol, if you will. There's a point where Superman keeps saying the word chuffs instead of cuffs, and Soul just keeps correcting him. He's like, they're cuffs. Or he, she, it, whatever. The AI is like cuffs. It's just constantly correcting him, and I think it's fun. It's a little thing that it's little flavor text stuff like that, which sort of further exemplifies the fact that this is a Kal-El who doesn't really live among the humans, right? Like he sort of does insofar as he's in human areas, right? And he serves and protects humans and lives his life surrounding the humans, but he's not really a member of the society, right? He doesn't really have, as far as we know, he doesn't really have any formal training whatsoever. And so little things like him saying chuffs instead of cuffs, it works, I think, in that. It's a little bit of flavor text that I do think adds something. But there is one specific aspect of the Superman suit that when it was first shown, I sort of really disliked it. And when I say first shown, I mean in the comic, like in the actual issue. This is the type of thing where I didn't like it from promo, and then reading the comic, I enjoyed it more. This is the inverse. I liked it from the thing. It looked interesting in promotional images. But then when it was revealed in the comic, I wasn't a huge fan of it. But given time, and after like 3 or 4 rereadings, I'm very much a fan of this version of Superman's cape. His cape, which is sort of a weird thing, right? The reason that I waited so long to say the word cape there, is because it's not the type of thing that you would think would really have any sort of impact, but I actually really enjoy it. So, again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the cape in Earth Prime, if you will, is typically tailored by Ma Kent out of Kryptonian fabric, and so it's just a cape, right? It's mostly a symbol more than anything else. Because it's the Kryptonian fabric, he can use it to shield himself and others from blasts. It works sort of like a shield, but it's just a cape, right? It serves no real functional purpose. But in this universe, the cape is not made of fabric in any way, shape, or form. The cape itself is formed of this dust, sunstone dust, which is, I believe presumably it is the main resource used on the planet of Krypton. I think at one point, early on in issue number 1, the captions of Superman's thoughts described the massive sunstone super capacitors, the size of skyscrapers. So it definitely seems like sunstone is sort of the main the main product of this culture. And so the cape itself is made of this dust, and so it's not always there. It can appear and disappear at will. And because it's this dust and not fabric, and because the suit is controlled by an AI, the dust itself is completely malleable. So there's a part in issue number 2 where Lois Lane is handcuffed to Superman, and he is basically trying to get the cuffs off, but he can't do it, and there's a bunch of enemies who are swarming him, and Superman essentially says, use the cape, use the dust, because he doesn't call it a cape. He says, use the dust to hold on to her. And then Superman flies away. And then his cape, forms around Lois Lane and keeps her from, having her arm ripped off, which is really interesting, right? It's really interesting. And like I said, when in the promotional images, it just looks like a regular cape, but it has a bit of a texture around it. So I was like, oh, this looks really cool. And then when I first read the issue, I was like, oh, this is kind of stupid. I mean, this isn't kind of stupid, but I kind of really don't like this. But after multiple readings, the more we go back, the more I like it, the more I enjoy the way it looks, and the more that I like the sort of symbolism of it. The entire idea is that Superman on his back, and I think Jason Aaron said this in an interview, so that it's not like this is an original observation I had. I just want to frame it as such. Jason Aaron said that this Superman is literally carrying the final vestiges of his planet on his back with him at all. So he's holding on to the last dust of Krypton, which is the name of this 5-issue story arc. And I think that's so cool. There are some things about it that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of. Like, for example, Superman uses the dust to actually heal the wounds of some innocents. Long story short, a building explodes and Superman's like, I gotta go help these people. And so he grabs them all. He uses the dust cape to envelop them all and fly them out of the building. And then he says, don't be afraid. The dust will treat your wounds. And so a piece of the cape, like a corner, sort of, wipes itself over a cut and leaves essentially a sunstone dust Band-Aid. I'm not super crazy about that. It seems a little bit weird. I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out moving forward. Obviously, it's only shown in like the one panel. So I don't know what the lasting effects of this are going to be. Because it seems like the Sunstone itself is a bit of a finite resource. The more the cape expands, the less of the suit covers Superman's body, right? So I don't know, does he just only have a limited amount of healing power? After the dust heals the wound, does it automatically sort of lift off the person and return to the cape? I'm not sure. It is definitely a little bit weird. But I do think it's cool insofar as it is a way for Superman to help and protect innocents in a way that he has never been able to do before, in a very, very direct way, right? Like, Superman can always jump into a burning building and bring people out. But after that, they're at the mercy of modern technology, right? They're at the mercy of modern science. If we don't get to a hospital in enough time, then they're out of luck. You know what I'm saying? And so now Superman has a much more direct impact on that. And I do think that that is really cool. And I'm curious to see how that's going to affect things moving forward. Now, finally, before we start to wrap things up, I do need to mention the elephant in the room, which is Lois Lane. Abso-Lois, if you will. Lois Lane in this is not a reporter at the Daily Planet. She's not a reporter in any way, shape, or form. She's an agent of Lazarus here. Which, unless we get some backstory for her actually being an agent of Lazarus, it just feels like we need somewhere for Lois to be in this, and we don't have any other way. But if we, get further issues and we see some more of her backstory and it makes sense, then I'll be fine with it. But right now, it just feels like a change to be a change, and I'm not super crazy about that. But like I said, we're 2 issues in. With any of this, I'm 1,000% willing to just give it room to grow. So Lois is an agent of Lazarus, and towards the end of issue number 2, as I said, Lois is sort of along for the ride when Superman is saving these innocents flying into this burning building. And after the interaction, Lois has to, your standard after-action report, and it is a dialogue between the Brainiac algorithm. More on that in the next section when we wrap things up. But basically, it asks her questions and she responds, and it doesn't respond in the way in which she likes. And so she's basically like, you know what? I'm going to write this. And her boss is like, what? Lois Lane, notorious hater of writing, wants to write the report? You once yelled at me for 3 hours because I made you write a motor pool request or something. And so Lois writes it, and at the end, it says written by Lois Lane or something, and she says, wow, that felt good, which I think is fun. It's a fun thing. Issue number 2 definitely pokes a lot of fun at, like, say, generative AI and stuff like that. And that is enjoyable. It's pretty silly to me. it is one thing that I do feel as we move further on just in the world, in the real world, as time progresses, it's going to be one of those things where 10 years from now, I think we'll come back and read this and it's going to be like, oh, this is very, of the time. Just the way in which it's written. It's not very timeless, I'll say. But it's a valid point nonetheless. I'm not a huge fan of the use of AI and generative AI, but that's a completely different conversation. I'm curious to see what they do with Lois moving forward. And at this point, I'm going to start wrapping things up. I'm really, really interested, as I think you've been able to gather from this video. I very much enjoy Absolute Superman 1 and 2, and I cannot wait to see what we're going to see from issues 3, 4, and 5, and hopefully moving forward, hopefully this universe continues to sell as well as it is now, and we get to see more and more issues as the months progress. That's something that I'm very excited and very hopeful for. I do have some questions. I'm very curious. So at the end of issue number 2, we see Superman leaving Brazil. He's going to Venezuela, and there's a sign on there's graffiti on the Venezuela sign that says something like, "Join the Omega Men." Now, I'm curious, who are the Absolute Omega Men? Now, I must be honest, I've heard of the name Omega Men before in DC Comics, but I've never actually read anything that they've been in. And so this information is based off of a cursory Google search. If you have more information, definitely let me know down in the comics. If you have any recommendations on what to read to learn more about this group, please let me know. But as far as I understand it, the Omega Men are the sort of interplanetary, maybe that's not the proper word. They're this extraterrestrial rebel group. So they are fighting up against tyranny. So I'm curious, in this absolute universe, are these Omega Men extraterrestrials as well? Or are they just a regular group of freedom fighters? There's a throwaway line very early in issue 1 where a random character who has no name says, "Is this the Omega Men?" about something that Superman has done. So clearly they exist in this, and presumably this is the type of thing that they could have done. So is this another group of extraterrestrials? I don't know. Looks like we'll have to wait at least until issue 3. Presumably we're going to get some form of answer next issue, but I'm really curious to see what's going on here. Also, when are we going to get to see Clark go to Antarctica? When are we going to get to see Clark fully powered, right? As we've seen him now, he's just been sun-starved. This seems to me the type of thing that they're probably going to wait until, issue 5 for. This will be the end of the arc where he goes to Antarctica or he goes to the Arctic or wherever. Svalbard is the place that he directly names. So presumably he's going to go there, get fully charged up. I don't know. I can't wait. I'm very curious to see what Absolute Superman looks like when he's fully powered, because he seems very powerful even when he's sun-starved. So I'm very curious here. Now, I'm also very, very curious about what's going on with Soul. I want to learn more about the origin of this sentient AI. Was this something that was designed and coded by Lara in the original blueprint of this exploratory suit? Or is this something that Jor-El created? Maybe this was Jor-El's addition to Lara's original design. But in any case, I get the distinct sense, I used these words earlier in the episode, but I get the very distinct sense that Soul operates as a sort of training wheels protocol. I definitely get the sense that Soul is actively limiting the power of Kal-El. Presumably because, he's young, he doesn't know he needs training, right? Which is a reasonable reason. But I definitely get the sense that Soul is actively dampening the power. I mean, there's a part in, I believe this is issue 1, where Kal-El, sorry, I keep calling him Superman, where Kal-El uses his heat vision, and Soul says, "Kal-El, you can't control it." And then after he uses it for a short while, he says, "Soul, shut me down." How does Soul shut him down? Like, does she cut off the power? Is she the reason that he's sun-starved? Is she acting as a gate to the solar radiation energy? Is she not allowing the battery to be charged? Or keep saying she. I have no idea. It is the AI not allowing Superman to be fully charged because he's untrained? I don't know. It seems very reasonable, but I hope we get to see something moving forward. And I'm very curious as to like what Kal-El's mindset is moving forward. Is he going to lose faith in Earth? I mean, does he even have faith to lose in Earth, right? There is a line, again, I think this is in the first issue, where he's talking to a Brazilian, and he says, I've seen the wonders of your world or something, and he says it kind of derogatory. He's talking specifically of Lazarus Corp. So does Kal-El have any faith in Earth? Or, I don't know, it's hard to tell, because there are parts in the beginning where it's like he's saying, no, we need to save this people. I'm not leaving until I help these people, which in and of itself implies a certain level of hope, right? But then his earlier statements, I don't know. I'm very curious. I want to hear more from Kal-El. I want to see more of him outside of the direct conflict with Lazarus, right? I want to see more about his thoughts, his inner workings. I want to know what his mindset is. How has growing up, how has this nomad lifestyle changed the way that he views all of humanity? I don't know, man. But I'm very excited to see. I'm very excited to see. Some other things that I really want to see from this, and I'm, to be honest, a little bit surprised that we haven't so far. Where's Lex? Where's Abso-Luthor, if you will? There's a lot of fun wordplay here. Where's Abso-Luthor? What's his role in this? Is he the head of Lazarus Corp? Or is he a nobody? Is he in the quote-unquote league of middle management in Lazarus and something else? I don't know. There's so far been no inklings of him whatsoever. I can't wait to see. Lex Luthor, as you guys know, is one of my favorite villains of all time. What I think would be the perfect absolute way to do this, and I don't think this is what's going to happen. I don't think this is what's going to happen. But the coolest way, in my opinion, would be to make it so that Lex Luthor is like the absolute Batman of the Superman storyline. So in the absolute universe, Lex Luthor is also like this working class guy who's incredibly intelligent, develops his own tech, and he works as a vigilante to stop Superman. I think that would be so fun. It would be such a turn on the heel, or a heel turn. It would be so out of left field. It would be so hilarious. And I don't know. Obviously, like I said, I don't think they're ever gonna do that. Because it's sort of something like that would vaguely, theoretically imply that people in the working class could be evil, which is definitely not the tone, which is not what they want to put forward here. Even though it would be technically true, right? Everybody is nuanced. So the true nuanced way to do the story would have some evil working class people and some good, corporate higher class people, but they're not going to do that. So my guess is that Lex Luthor is either, like I said, either the head of Lazarus Corp, which I don't think that's going to be it. For starters, I don't think Lex would be the head of a company that doesn't have his name on it. Secondly, Lazarus is obviously a direct allusion to, like, say, the League of Shadows and Ra's al Ghul. So I don't know if there's going to be some connections there. Maybe that's how we bring in absolutebatman into this. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. And Lex as the League of Middle Management in Lazarus, I don't think that necessarily makes sense either. If I had to guess, perhaps Lex is maybe the head of his own corporation, but it's like struggling, like maybe it's a tech startup that is like trying to get off the ground. And maybe that would actually be that's interesting. So what if Lois Lane in this realizes that Lazarus Corp is up to no good, acts as a whistleblower, which begins like the takedown of Lazarus Corp, which allows the rise of LUTHOR Corp. That would be interesting. That would actually be an interesting story. And then that's a way where you get Lex as like a peripheral character who is involved in stuff, but isn't like the main villain or the main character of this. because it seems pretty clear that the main villain here is going to be Lazarus Corp, and by extension, Brainiac. As I mentioned, the Brainiac algorithm is used in, I want to say, issue number 2. I'm curious, though, what is Brainiac's role here, right? When we see him, he's in the Nevada desert at a Lazarus R&D facility. So is Brainiac purely human? Is he purely Lazarus R&D? Or is he still Kryptonian? I'm not 100% sure, but I'm really, really excited to see. I can't wait to see how this is going to turn out, guys. I think the story that they've begun here is really, really interesting, and I just can't wait. The 3rd issue will not be releasing until January 1st, which is like a little more than 2 weeks from now. So long. I can't wait that long. But I guess, whatever. Time is what time is. And that really sucks. But January 1st cannot get here soon enough. I believe Absolute Superman number 1 is just going into its 2nd printing. So now is the perfect time to get involved and start reading and get in on the ground level of this character. I think it's going to be really fun, and I'm really, really excited to see where it goes. But that's where we're going to wrap things up. We're going to go ahead and call it there. Again, like I said in the beginning, let me know down below, what did you guys think of this version of the Man of Tomorrow? Let me know. I obviously really liked it. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Make sure that you like and subscribe for more content. And we'll be back here next Tuesday for a look at Absolute Wonder Woman. And I will see you guys then.